it's time for an update and forecast on the park fire. Main place we're going to be focusing on is the northern edge of the fire because that's where it seems to be the most active right now. Not a huge surprise because we have those strong southerly winds. First thing I should point out is we've seen an expansion in the evacuation orders and warnings, especially on the northern side of this fire. On the southern side, which is closer towards Chico, we've actually heard of some orders being downgraded to warnings, and that really just tells you where the fire is the most active. I think the easiest way to see it is actually just looking at the satellite imagery, where kind of the main reason I wanted to do this video is because this northern side is making a huge run right now. You can see just what it's done in the last few hours, and it actually seems like it's picking up steam. So there's almost two different sections that we're going to be looking at today. There's that northern finger that is making a run, and then there's this northeastern side of the fire as well. So just looking at the CalTopo website, we're going to be able to see where the structures are, kind of get our bearings here for the park fire. You have Chico down on the south. I had listened to the briefing and they said that this whole western and southern side of the fire is actually holding very well. And it sounds like there's also been some improvements. I'll just turn on the perimeter for this part. Some improvements on this eastern side around Forest Ranch as well. You can see how it bumped right up against Forest Ranch but didn't actually go through that community. That was kind of the main story that we were talking about yesterday. But I mean, it seems like they dodged a bullet there, and now the most rapid spread on this fire seems to be actually up here, and our winds are going to stay to the south. So potentially some good news for Forest Ranch or Paradise or Chico. Where some of the bad news comes in is you can see that Cohasset is now within the fire perimeter. We saw a lot of growth yesterday evening and overnight. I will say that doesn't mean that all of those structures have been destroyed. CAL FIRE, the latest number I saw, they said 134 structures destroyed, because within a fire perimeter you can have low severity burning, high severity burning, even some unburned islands. So if you do live in Cohasset, thoughts and prayers go out to you, but there could still be a little hope that not just everything is most likely destroyed in here. So that's the update for Chico, Paradise, Cohasset, Forest Ranch. Now let's really focus on this northern side, because you can actually see the most recent perimeter was showing this northern finger starting to extend right there. But then if we turn on Modus and Veers, that's going to be some of the more current heat information that we have to go off of. Yellow is going to be where heat was maybe more than 24 hours ago. Orange is going to be 24 to 12. Red is going to be within the last 12 hours. So right off the bat, you can see there hasn't been as much recent heat around Forest Ranch or really this entire southern edge of the fire. It's been the southerly winds that have been the most important part of the park fire basically throughout its entire lifetime, just rapidly spreading it towards the north. I'm actually interested to see what distance we're dealing with right now, just based on that. So that's showing 31 miles in a very short period of time. A lot of factors have led to this. We had a heat wave at the beginning of July that dried out a lot of the fuels, and we had a lot of fuels this year because we had a wet winter. And then on top of that, if you look at fire history, there's basically no fire history here in the last 20 years. And what little fire history we did have up here was from 2013, and the fire just went right through that. So there must have been enough fuel that grew back there that burn scar didn't really help us out. So abundant fuels that dried out a lot because of the heat wave at the beginning of the month, and then above average temperatures over the last few days. And then I would say the biggest factor has just been the strong southerly wind that has not let up. This kind of gets into the weather maybe a bit more than we need to, but basically there's a big ridge over California, and as it's been exiting, it sets up a stronger pressure gradient, and then you get stronger winds. And actually, if we put on the wind plot, you can see that it's just rushing from the south right now. Some gusts around 25 to 30 miles per hour. That is kind of where some of the good news comes in, though. After today, we start moving in the right direction, where our temperatures cool down, more moisture moves in, and it shouldn't be as windy with the red flag warning expiring tonight. So there's the red flag warning right now. Main reason we have that in place is 10 to 20 mile per hour winds with gusts up to 30. Low relative humidity in the teens, so the drier the air is, the drier the fuels get, and then the faster the fire can spread. And then if we look at the forecast, so that's going to be today, that's tonight, that's tomorrow, and then that's tomorrow night. Today you can see up in the 90s, those wind gusts picking up in the afternoon. That's what we're seeing right now, and is why we're seeing such rapid growth towards the north right now, because you notice the direction those winds are coming from the south. And then relative humidity in the teens. Here's where you can look at tomorrow, though. Looks like there's a drop in temperatures, actually a pretty significant drop, and then much more moisture. That is maybe the best thing to see right there, because some of that moisture could find its way into the finer fuels and hopefully calm this down a little bit, but the recoveries overnight don't remain very good. You'd like to see that go up to 70 to 80% overnight and have the fire really calm down overnight, but as we've seen over the past couple nights, it's been remaining active. And then winds right there, it doesn't show any wind gusts or strong ones tomorrow afternoon, but that's where there is a bit of a question mark in the forecast. Some of the models that I was looking at were saying there's still a potential for some 20 to 25 mile per hour winds. So I'm going to leave the weather forecast as tomorrow is better than today, guaranteed. But it's still going to be a challenging forecast because we're still going to have southerly winds, and the fuels are still very dry and very abundant because they've basically been accumulating for decades. So now the next thing that we can do, because we really do want to focus on the two different sections of the fire that seem the most active, northern side and the northeastern side. Maybe the first thing I should say on this northern side, look how fast it is going right now. And then we come back here, maybe one silver lining is that we don't have that many structures directly on to the north of this fire. And last I heard in their briefing, they said their plan is to stop it at 36 if they can. But we do have these structures up here. So if you live to the north of this fire, based on this perimeter, you might think you have plenty of time. But I would stay I would keep watching these evacuation orders and warnings. And if you're in the red, you definitely want to get out as fast as possible. And if you're in the yellow, or basically anywhere to the north of this fire, I would get ready to go and be able to leave the second you go from a warning to an order, or even leave before if you start to feel kind of that feeling in your gut that it's time to get out. Because you can just see how fast that northern side of the fire is going. And there's really nothing that's going to stop it over the next few hours from just continuing that same kind of growth. And if we come back here, that's the more accurate heat detections that we have to go off of. But, I don't know when those are from. And if we look at the more current heat detections, keep in mind this is usually going to over-exaggerate the fire because it picks up on some of the smoke or some of the heat coming off of the plume. But right here, once this updates, you're going to see more current heat detections. And you can see how quickly that northern side is growing. So just right there, we can measure the distance from there to there. That's about 8 mile. That might have been an 8-mile run in the last hour or two. And again, that might be overestimating, but that just shows how fast this thing is moving. And then it looks like it's another 8 miles to where we have this cluster of structures up here. So yeah, if you live in these areas and you have an evacuation order, I would get out immediately. I don't want to be too alarmist, but I don't know if I've ever seen a fire moving that quickly on the satellite imagery before. So now we can actually kind of look at what this fire actually looks like. So we'll check out the northern side of the fire first. So at first it starts off, it seems like it's mostly just smoke, and then you start to see some of those pyrocumulus clouds coming in. That basically just tells you how extreme this fire behavior is. In order to get those, you have to have a lot of rising motion. And in order for that rising motion to happen, you have to have a lot of heat being generated at the surface, a lot of fuels being consumed. And then kind of the bad part of that is when you get that much rising motion, what's going to happen, it's rising up like that, then wind starts to rush in to take the place of that air that's rising. And that's where you can get very gusty, erratic winds at the surface, and that's where the wildfire actually starts creating its own weather. So that's the northern side, and you can just see how fast it's going and just how much energy and power that it has. Now we can look at this northeastern side of the fire because you can see that's also very active. Now on the northeastern side, it doesn't look like it's making as quick of a run, and it doesn't look like there's as many structures on this northeastern side. So that is why I'm most worried about that northern finger that's extending right there. But again, a lot of activity on this northeastern side, and you can actually see that if we check out this camera. So a lot of rising motion right there. Basically, we're looking down at the fire as it's moving up towards the north. So you have the southerly winds basically blowing almost directly at this camera, pushing the fire further to the north on the northeastern side. Now let's check it out from the eastern view of the fire. And this is, I think, one of the craziest camera shots that I've ever seen. So the camera's going to be right around here looking at the fire in this way. And when we turn it on, watch this huge pyrocumulus cloud right about there. It's very rare that you see enough heat being generated to lift your smoke that high into the atmosphere. And then you can also just see how quickly that's moving as those southerly winds push the fire towards the north. So that's basically the situation that's going on the park fire right now. I just want to reiterate again that if you're on that northern side of the fire, if you're in any of these communities, to definitely stay updated with evacuation orders and warnings. And I'll try to do more updates as the situation changes, so stay tuned. Again, thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who's been impacted by the park fire. And yeah, hopefully the conditions improve tomorrow as the weather starts to cooperate a bit more. But right now, the strong southerly wind, we're going to continue to see this grow towards the north. So best to be ready.